What's the number one thing a doctor needs to be successful long-term in growing their practice, being bulletproof in their business, and really having a phenomenal life? It's to really focus on vitality and your body. Here are the best practices that I've searched for and I've tried to implement in my own life that have helped me. And so I want to share those with you guys. Here we go. The title of this is called How to Construct a Millionaire Body and a Bulletproof Mind. This is the power protocol for doctors. This is what I've been trying to follow myself. So I hope it helps you guys. So a little bit about who I am. I'm a physician trained at Georgetown, wanted to go to the next level of cardiology. So I learned something called functional medicine, where we were actually able to treat the root cause of disease. While I was doing that, I launched my real estate company on the side. So I didn't have to be beholden to insurances and things like that. And I had my own sources of income. So I launched Viking Capital. We have $750 million of real estate that we control. On top of that, I really went into another passion project, which is helping physicians achieve success in business and life. I did that with a podcast first, the Limitless MD podcast, and then I launched my coaching company, Limitless MD. We help these doctors really thrive in three different main categories. One is practice optimization of their medical practice. Number two is pivoting and launching a real estate portfolio. And the final one is becoming a coaching consultant. Obviously, all three are near and dear to me. And that's why I sort of encourage that and teach that. With that said, the goal of today's talk is really to talk about how your health and vitality and having this millionaire body and mindset can really help you thrive and be successful. And I want to acknowledge a mentor of mine, Dr. Gabrielle Raya. She's actually my personal physician, and she's really helped me in my understanding of some of this strategies for high performance individuals, right? There's a different kind of healthcare and vitality strategy for high performance individuals versus people who are sick or more stable. And so thank you again, Dr. Gabrielle Raya, for your help. And let's get into this. So high performance MD mindset. Really what we're going to talk about is these three main goals. We're really going to define this type of person out there who I call the extremophile. They are an immense amount of stress. And how do they handle that where there's too little stress, too much stress, and then what we call eustress, EU stress, the right amount of stress. Next is you got to control the controllables, right? If you can control the controllables, you can manage whatever comes your way. And then finally, how do you apply these tools and strategies to optimize and enhance performance in each of your domains? Let's get into the doctor archetype. So a typical day in the life of a high performance doctor, right? They're excited. This is hard. It's working, right? Your clinic is seeing more patients, and then reimbursements are being cut, right? Are you going to go bankrupt? Oh, I'm good. Oh, we just had our best month ever. Oh, wait, my life sucks, right? So this up and down emotions, physical feelings, neurotransmitters, adrenaline cycling through you, and then the health of a high performance MD. What is happening internally? Well, you have increased cortisol, then you have elevated inflammatory markers. Perhaps you feel exhausted. Then there's weight gain, increased smoking, drinking, whatever vices, insomnia, all of this can happen. So when you're looking at the stress load on your body and your health, what are the main biological parameters? Well, it's cortisol, it's DHEA, it's epinephrine, norepinephrine, your hemoglobin A1C, your sugar marker, blood pressure, waist to height ratio, your BMI. I would argue perhaps more than BMI, percent body fat, cholesterol, right? These are all things that can be influenced and perhaps negatively influenced by the stress load on your health. And there's something called allostatic load, which is essentially the stress on your body. And typical markers that spike when you have a high allostatic, and the typical markers that spike when you have a high allostatic load is glucose, IL-6, which is a pretty powerful inflammatory marker, your lipid profiles, and heart rate variability. So when you have heart rate variability, that's good. You want beat-to-beat variation because you're not putting the accelerator on your body, and it's parasympathetic drive, which allows for natural variation of your heart rate. When you press the accelerator, there's less variation. You're hammering your heart and your heartbeat to be beating more like a clock, on point and very fast. And so these are all the parameters we look at, and it's all fine and dandy, but when the challenge is greater than your capacity, that's when things start to break down. And that's what we have to be careful about. Let's look at the culmination and combination of stressors. There's the obvious stressors, right? There's death, divorce, moving job, kids, problems in the workplace, tough employees, etc. But there's also the hidden stressors. These are things that very few people look at. And I recently underwent a thorough evaluation, courtesy of Dr. Lyons, and I was able to really figure out a lot of my issues. I didn't have many issues, but the few issues I had, I'm really now piecing together strategies for it. And this is something that traditional doctors completely miss, and even functional doctors sometimes miss as well, because they're really looking for people who are sort of not optimized. So when you are optimized, how can you go to the next level? Well, these are the things you can look into: toxic burden, heavy metal. For example, if you eat a lot of sushi, that's something I would definitely get mercury testing done. Hormonal dysfunction. Just because your hormones are not like on the floor and they're not completely depleted doesn't mean they're at optimal levels. So you want your estrogen to be at the optimal level, your cortisol, your thyroid, your testosterone. These are all important. Micronutrient insufficiencies, right? Even if you eat a great diet and you shop at Whole Foods, you can still have micronutrient insufficiencies. Your gut microbiome may be messed up. You may have small forms of leaky gut. You may have a little bit of inflammation in the gut that can affect your digestion and absorption, perhaps mold and Lyme. So these are all things that we need to have a little deeper dive in so we can protect our body, have more resilience, have more functional capacity, so we can really take on, more things. And as we go to our limits, they say, our limits can expand, but we must be able to, in a healthy way, go to our limits. Let's talk about the pathology of stress. So the common stress issues we face as extremophiles, and I'll define extremophiles in a second, are maybe interpersonal stress, right? This is the stress we put on ourselves. Social isolation. If you're an entrepreneur, you're a CEO, you're a physician running a practice, sometimes you feel by yourself, you feel helpless. Moral injury, right? This is where you lose autonomy. The insurance companies are coming down on you. The government regulations are coming down on you. You don't feel like you have agency or capability to do what you want. And existential crisis, like this is like, hey, I've been practicing medicine for almost 20 years now. Is this all there is? What else is out there? Is this what I was meant to do for the rest of my life? These kind of, existential crises are sometimes we come across, especially when we're mid-career. So an extremophile, the real definition is an organism that thrives in extreme environment. Basically, Navy SEALs, trauma surgeons, police officers, politicians, you can even argue. These are individuals who are exposed to an extraordinary amount of high allostatic load, which is in form of physical, mental, emotional, or existential stress. And this is a part of their profession. So the question is, well, they could change profession, but more likely they have to create adaptability measures, become anti-fragile, and really optimize everything internally, externally, socially, physically, mentally to thrive. Nurses, people in the healthcare profession, rodeo, MMA, race car drivers, people have too many kids, these are examples. So let's look at the high-performing MD archetype. You have limited time as a doctor, right? We push off any health-related task. We travel frequently. Sometimes we have multiple roles. We're the CEO of the clinic or the CEO of the hospital, or doing all that, but we also are a practitioner. We're doing procedures, then we're the admin person. There's late nights, early mornings, we're on call. We're pushing hard, crash and burn, and do this multiple times a year, right? So we are predictable. It's not like, oh man, I'm so unique. Well, your uniqueness is true compared to the average population, but among this archetype of high performers, this is common. So the question is stress harmful or helpful? Well, stress can be harmful if it depletes, it debilitates, if it inhibits certain things, then it definitely should be avoided. But it can be enhancing if it's in the right amount, that your body can handle. So it can enhance you can improve, you can facilitate, and you can utilize all your resources to withstand it. So as we analyze physicians, though we take care of patients, we ourselves are sometimes not optimized, right? 7 out of 10 physicians could be overweight, 4 out of 10 are obese, 5 out of 10 maybe have high blood pressure, 1 out of 3 are pre-diabetic, 6 out of 10 have medicated depression, 3 out of 10 are on medicine for anxiety. So these are all the things we need to evaluate, look at, and see what's going on, and then we have to go after it. So let's look at the vitality blueprint for doctors. The first is awareness. We really need to understand what's going on, and then you need to be open. So Carol Dweck has a great book called Mindset, and in it she talks about this concept of fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. You may be asking, hey, what's the difference? Well, the main difference I would say in a fixed mindset is you have a desire to be seen as perfect and talented, so you avoid challenge, you protect yourself, you give up easily, you don't have sustained long efforts, right? It's temporary. You get frustrated, you ignore feedback or criticism, you feel threatened by others' success, you're competitive, you're not collaborative. That overall is not a strategy for long-term success and growth. Now, the growth mindset is this. You always are learning. You have an ultimate desire to learn and improve. You embrace challenges. You always look for feedback so you can up level. You believe effort is important. You're inspired by others. You're collaborative. You want to raise the tide for all boats. That's the first tactic. The second tactic is to control the controllables. So as you're trying to optimize your life, you can only focus on certain categories that you can control. One is sleep, right? Sleep is one of the most powerful things people can do to really optimize their life. Stress management, schedule, right? Getting up at the same time, going to sleep at the same time. Also using your body instead of just the circadian rhythm, which is based on sun and your exposure and how your body is optimal throughout the day. There's something called the ultradian rhythm where you're learning to work in 30, 60, 90-minute blocks of pure focus and concentration. Then you take a break and then you do it again. And your body can actually thrive in those kind of flow states. Sex hormones, right? Really learning about your estrogen, your testosterone, and making sure that they're the right levels. Having what we call muscle-centric medicine, which Dr. Gabrielle Lyons has talked about. It's really trying to build more muscle, increase more protein, and really make your body resilient by putting it through good amount of stress through strength training. Nutrition, really figuring out what are the right tactics and strategies for food intake and where you're using food as fuel and not for emotion. And then finally, how do we gauge and have a proper cadence to utilize our mental energy throughout the day? By you using certain words, you create a narrative, and the narrative sometimes can determine your outcome. So there's people who are healthy, they say, hey, there's healthy tension, they're inactive, they're bored, they're motivated. 6 people use a word like burnout and breakdown and panic and anxiety and anger. People who are peak performance say, hey, I'm just focused, or hey, I'm slightly fatigued, right? Oh, I'm optimal stress, or I have a slight amount of stress overload that I need to mitigate. Use the right vocabulary and you will start influencing your outcome. Okay, tactic number 2 is really reinterpreting the stimulus. So if you're going to do something pretty intense, such as jumping out of this plane in this scenario, you really want to practice courage. How do you practice courage? Control the nervous system. How do you control the nervous system? One of the most powerful ways is breath work. And so there's something called box breathing where it's 4x4 breathing. So 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds, blow out for 4 seconds, and then 4 seconds in again. Hold for 4 seconds, blow out for 4 seconds. So by you doing that, you can really get into a powerful state. You can control your nervous system. You increase parasympathetic drive. You increase oxygenation. You increase circulation. You're probably activating more of your prefrontal cortex. You're quieting your amygdala, your fear center. And so this is very, very powerful. Tactic number 3 is action, right? By regulating your blood sugar, prioritizing protein, muscle-centric medicine, right? Taking things such as ashwagandha, L-theanine, oxytocin, and a certain type of medications. These can really help stabilize you and your neurotransmitters as well as your mindset. We talked about sleep. How do we really optimize sleep? Consistency, right? 7 to 9 hours a day. Tracking, you can use like an Oura ring like I have, Whoop band, your Apple Watch, a lot of technology out there to do that. Hygiene, right? Sleep hygiene, low lights, dark rooms, cold temperature, white noise. Then there's exercise throughout the day, increase your sleep quality, and you want to do it at least 6 hours before bed, not right before bed because it can trigger you. Then there's napping, right? 20 to 30 minutes, it would be ideal. If you're really groggy, 90 to 120 minutes. And there's technology out there called NuCalm, N-U-C-A-L-M. It's a neuroacoustic software that drops you into delta and theta states so you can have sort of a super power nap and you wake up totally refreshed. So it's a technology that helps drop you into that more of the relaxed brainwave states. Then there's a strategy called Nappuccino, which combines napping with caffeine intake. So you can take a cappuccino, then you quickly try to get a nap in, and then at the end of the nap, you wake up. Normally you could be groggy, but because the caffeine has just kicked in at that 15 to 20 minute window, boom, you're ready to go. Nighttime urination, you want to avoid that by trying to front load your water, sip throughout the day, and then after about 6 p.m., you want to hold off on water intake so you can sleep throughout the night. And obviously, if none of this works or you're having severe snoring or waking up truly lethargic, consider getting a sleep study. So what are other things you can do as a tactic for performance enhancement? Well, the physiologic sigh. This is just like taking a momentary breather like this. That helps reset your body and gives you a little bit of energy, and again, puts you more into a parasympathetic state, which allows you to contemplate the stress you're about to go through. Hot sauna is very good for circulation. Cold immersion therapy is very powerful. Sensory deprivation tanks are also known as flotation tanks. HIIT therapy, which is high intensity interval training, acupressure, hypnotherapy. So these are all modalities you can try for performance enhancing so you can mitigate the effects of stress. If I could tell you one slide for you to take away from this presentation, it would be this one. And it's how to be resilient, how to be anti-fragile. Most people who are fragile, what they have is they have a certain amount of functional capacity. Something happens, they get injured, psychological something happens, and boom, they just go downhill. Functional capacity decreases. They finally hit a certain tipping point, and obviously they try to respond. Healing happens, mental resilience happens. Something is happening, and you're trying to recover. But because you've gone down so low and you had no reserves, you eventually recover, but you don't recover back to your previous level of functional capacity, and that results in a permanent loss. Now, folks who are resilient and who've built up these reserves, physical reserves, mental reserves, psychological reserves, right? Nutrient reserves, they have this buffer. And then that acute hazard happens, then they drop down, the body kicks in, there's a response, there's a recovery. But because of the resiliency that they have, they retain their previous level of functional capacity. That's what you want. That's what resilience looks like. That's what anti-fragile looks like. So harnessing your biology of stress. There are big drivers for stress, which is usually cortisol, and for your drive to do things and rewards are usually dopamine. And there's protocols for that. The interesting thing that we noticed that here is when you really hit it big and let's say you sell your company for multiple millions. Let's say your clinic has the best year ever. You perform a phenomenal surgery that was experimental. Whatever the reason is, you have a dopamine high, and you have to be careful because your vulnerability risk is that high. So usually, vices can happen, risky behavior can happen at that time. Same thing when you're at your bottom, at your worst, at your trough, where you lost the election, a patient died, something happened, and so your risk for alcohol, suicide, trauma, tragedy can happen as well. So at these peaks and troughs is usually when the most riskiest behavior can happen. And so you want to be extra careful. And it has to do with dopamine. And then we talked about courage really being controlling your nervous system. And so this is what it looks like. When you're unstressed, when you're in control and you're confident and you're going through life, you're really using your prefrontal cortex, which is tight control of thoughts, emotions, and actions. And it's parasympathetic. And when you're stressed, your amygdala is activated. And your amygdala is more of your fear center. And this is where you have weaker controls of thoughts, emotions, actions. You do stupid things. You act irrationally sometimes. And it is just something to be aware of. The key really is to have this sort of neutral, focused mind. That is where if you can stay more in that default setting, you're going to be really successful. And the way to do that is intermittent reward schedules, limit layering, purposeful restriction of things. So, I've done something called a prolon fast, PROLON fast, which is essentially a 5-day fasting mimicking diet. Very low calories, like 1,100 calories day 1, and then only 800 calories day 2 through 5. And it just forces you to adapt to this reduced amount of nutrition, and you really sort of master your mind. Meditation is another way to do this. Restricting caffeine intake. A lot of people use pre-workout drinks before they work out. Go for a week without that. And doing like really intense physical activities. That intense focus is very powerful. And sometimes the best way to really carry out our life in this neutral, focused mind way is not to be worried about our results, but really be focused on the processes. Control our inputs and assume that the outputs will eventually take care of themselves. So what's the cost of inaction? Well, if you don't figure this physiology of your mind and your brain out, if you don't take control of your neurotransmitters, you don't build the resilience, you start not adapting all these tactics and habits of a high performance MD, you may have low energy. You may have lack of efficiency. You can only have episodic success. From some of the best people I've studied in the world, the Elon Musks, the Michael Jordans, the LeBrons, the Tony Robbins of the world, they have long periods of sustained success. That's the key to really being a legend. The other thing is fragility. You're going to have burnout and you will not have the legacy and impact you want. So be mindful of inaction. So in terms of vitality, there is a pyramid system that I recommend. A lot of people want to go to the top because that's the sexiest items. This bottom part, if you master this, you will be successful. It's sleep, mindfulness, nutrition, and movement, right? Getting that sleep, we've talked about that strategy for sleep I've shared earlier. The mindfulness and the meditation is very key. Eating the right things for your body based on your goals and strategies, and using food as fuel versus emotion. And then movement, right? There's a lot of people who exercise once a day and they think that's enough. But if you're sedentary most of the time and all you do is do a gym workout, that may not be good enough. You may need to get into the 10,000 steps thing. You may need to consistently 2 or 3 times a day walk. All of that's important. Sunlight exposure is very important as well. If you do the foundational work, then I encourage you to start looking into the second level, which is supplements, adaptogens, doing nutrient testing and figure out which hypernutrients you need to take. Intermittent fasting occasionally, powerful breath work can really help you build resilience and reset your central nervous system. Then we start moving into technology. So, the Sleep 8 bed, which actually measures your sleep and can control the temperature of your bed, pulse electromagnetic therapy, blood testing, red light therapy, infrared sauna, more advanced meditation training like 40 years of Zen where they hook you up to all these electrodes and you work with neuroscientists for a week, EEG training like the Muse headband, the Aura ring, the Whoop band, all that's very powerful. Then this is more of the really optimized folks, or this is what they're doing. They're doing the Da Vinci Superman protocol, which is, I'll share with you in a second. It shows some oxygen training, some electromagnetic therapy, some peak VO2. And then finally, for joints, for different parts of your body, for hair growth, things like that, you're looking at PRP, stem cells, peptides, hormone replacement therapy. So this is the vitality pyramid and biohacking pyramid, and you want to stack one on top of another, on top of another. And don't start at the top, start at the bottom. So we talked about sleep as a fundamental force of nature that needs to be mastered if you really want to have vitality. Nutrition, for sure. Movement, and what I mean by movement is not only walking and staying moving, but also your frame and your structure. So powerful lymphatic drainage, acupressure, acupuncture, stretching, calisthenics, mobility work. All of that's very powerful. Technology and adaptogens we've talked about. And here's the Da Vinci protocol. So really step one is essentially this pulse electromagnetic field that's on this mat that's being created. So you lay there and you activate that. Next is you do exercise with oxygen training. So you put hyper oxygenation while you exercise. And then finally, you do photobiomodulation with light therapy. And if you do it in this certain protocol called the Da Vinci protocol, you truly, all your markers go sky high. Your capacity increases dramatically, and it's quite powerful. Stem cells, PRP, peptides, we've talked about that. As we wrap up here, you really want to master your body and your mind. To have a millionaire body and mind, you need all these things. And the question is in which order and what's most important for you. And it's obviously going to be custom and unique. So you may want to work with a practitioner. You may want to read about more of these things. It's very powerful and I highly recommend it, because if you have this going on, then stress is going to become your best friend, and it's something that just spurs you on versus that holds you back. You're going to feel better. You're going to have a powerful physique. You'll have athletic energy. You'll unlock superhuman efficiency. You'll reduce the defensive health-related costs that a lot of people have to pay, and you're going to elongate and have an optimal lifespan. If I had to just summarize it here, hypernutrition, right, and having that nutrition discipline, anti-fragile, you need to build a resilience. Try to reframe setbacks and control the narrative. Ascend the vitality pyramid from sick to stable to vital to invincible. Have that restorative mindset with meditation, mindfulness, heart-brain coherence. Emphasize strength training, muscle building, and protein intake so you can have a powerful metabolic engine. Work on breath work so you can practice courage, and sleep optimization, which is the number one longevity tactic on the planet. And guys, if you want more of this stuff, go to thelimitlessmd.com. You can find more about our programs. You can find more about how to contact us, and also all our YouTube channel, our podcast, and all the other great resources we have for you guys. So with that said, guys, be phenomenal.